Hello, my beautiful star beams. I'm super excited to chat with you today. We're going to be talking about the law of revision, or the technique of revision. And this is actually from Neville Goddard. And I have been seeing it pop up everywhere. You know, when you place your energy and attention on something, you get more of it. The universal algorithm, well, mine's set on the law of revision right now. And so we're going to talk about how it applies to the Akashic records and to inner child healing or past version healing. Y'all may have heard me talk about that before. So if you would like to work one-on-one, you can head down to the show notes or the description for ways that we can do that, or you can join the School of Magic, and this is our cosmic community of learning and support. This is where I do monthly live calls so I can answer your questions about spirituality and manifesting so you can create your dream life. We're doing activation activities, energy updates, workshops, master classes, all of the fun magical things. I would love to have you in the community, and that is also in the show notes below. So with the law of revision, that is stating in layman terms that you can go back and change your past, change the memories, the emotions, the feelings. Now, in my thought process, we have two different things going on here, okay? So sometimes when I'm working with clients, they are very much caught up in past narratives, things that happen in childhood, young adult, and I'm not saying those things didn't happen. Those are very real experiences, okay? I do not think when we are holding past narratives that we can simply just go in and change the memory, okay? Because those energetic cords are running very deep. But I'm going to share an example of how I have shifted one of mine after a period of healing, okay? A long period of healing. So anyway, we have things that have happened in the past that when we are pulling back on those things, like, oh, I can't do this because of that, right? Or I was taught this. What ends up happening is you create your future from that space. Your ego mind, which is fine. Our ego is there to keep us safe. It's there to keep us in comfortability. It's like a evolutionary physiology setup that we have, okay? It is literally just trying to keep you safe. But sometimes that safety does not equate growth and evolution, right? Your ego is really wanting to be there to keep you at a homeostasis point at all times. So if you have inner child wounds or past version, when I say past version, what I actually mean is anybody younger than you. You at 18, 20, 30, depending on how old you are. So when we have hyper independence wounds, abandonment trust wounds, perfectionism, just anything that is keeping us stuck in a behavioral pattern that is not desirable, we are pulling from past experiences and projecting that into our future. So that's why you get caught in loops, right? That's not your fault because you're not consciously doing that. It is something that is coming up from your subconscious, right? When you have wounds like this that run all the way to childhood, when you have experiences that trigger those behavioral patterns, your inner child or your past version is taking over your consciousness. You're still living in their consciousness. So you have to go in and release them from those energetic cords. Okay, so when I am doing Akasha healing with people and talking to their inner child consciousness, most often what I see is they're caught in these energetic timestamps. They think that the trauma is happening over and over and over again. And I come in, I'm like, hey, did you know that there's actually an adult version of you that's living a completely different experience? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, because there's a consciousness gap, right? That's why sometimes when you go to family functions and you've been doing great on your spiritual awakening journey, and then all of a sudden you become like a child again, and you start reacting to family members, you start reacting to your parents, how you would have in the past, and then you get home and you're like, what the heck? I thought that I healed these things. It's because our cells and our DNA and our energy fields and our chakras hold trauma memories. They hold PTSD. So when those things are unhealed, when you get around people who you had PTSD trauma with, right, or exes or whatever, you snap back into that state of consciousness. And then, 444 on my timer. And so when you get home, you are out of the PTSD, and now you are observing your PTSD and saying, dang, why did I react that way instead of respond? Okay. So the law of revision in my perceptual lenses is going back and not changing the past, because you can't really change the past. Like, those things happened, okay? But what you can do is change the way that you interact with those memories or your inner children or your past versions. Become the higher self, not be the trauma, observe the trauma, heal the trauma, let go of the trauma, okay, and transmute it through your body. Now what happens is you have a different future. Because if you have unhealed wounds, you are going to just keep that cycle going, right? And that's what you're always going to experience in your future. But when you go back and you heal those things, now you shift as a person in the here and now. Like, you change at a DNA cellular structure in your Akasha field. You quantum jump into a completely different timeline, because now you are a completely different person. You are also healing your inner children and your past versions, and they are coming onto the new timeline with you as the new version. Those inner children and those past versions, actually, when they let go of that trauma, it's not that that trauma didn't happen. Like, it's out in the Akasha field. There are versions of your inner children and past versions, younger versions, that experience that in real time. But when you heal them, you shift into a new person and a new timeline who that trauma affected in a completely different way. And then you have a completely different future out in front of you. Okay, so sometimes when you're listening to law of revision things, it's like, oh, well, you can just shift that memory like it never happened. I'm like, it's still imprinted, okay, in the Akasha fields. But you can change who you are in this now moment and how you react and how you heal those things, right? And now we're living a different future, if you will. Okay, so I actually shifted one of my memories with my inner children. So when you start doing these things and you get deeper into it, now you can kind of level up in what you're able to do. And so when I was a child, I had a lot of lack and scarcity mentality, all those things, right? And I would talk about that all the time with my clients or just friends or whatever. I'd be like, I was here and now I'm here. But what I realized was I was keeping my inner children stuck in those past narratives of like, oh, y'all were broke, oh, y'all were poor, all this stuff, right? I had to raise my consciousness level up to get them out of those states and change my future. Okay, so when I was a child, I always knew I was going to be a millionaire. Like, you could not tell me anything different. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I just knew that I was. And so what I actually was doing before I even knew it was I was picking up on a future timeline of me where that had already happened. Okay, I could perceive timelines before I even knew it. And so about 6-7 months ago, okay, I was on a drive one day and I was like, okay, if I'm a millionaire in the future, that technically means I'm a millionaire now, right? That means I was a millionaire as a child, because time is not linear, okay? It is all happening all at one time, all these parallel universes and realities. And then a couple weeks later, I was laying on my bed and I was thinking about this business that I used to have, my doggy daycare. And I was like, you know what? I actually already am a millionaire. I said, in the last year of my business before I sold it, we brought in $400,000 worth of revenue that 7th year. I was like, that is not even totaling all the years that we were open. I was like, even though I didn't technically, quote unquote, have $1 million in my bank account because I had overhead and employees and you just like all this stuff, I was like, but I pulled $1 million into myself. And so anything I make after today, like when I had that realization, I'm actually a multimillionaire. Okay. And then I went back and I talked to my inner children in my Akasha field and I was like, hey, I just had this realization. I was like, this is why y'all always thought that we were, or you knew that we were going to be a millionaire. Like, you felt me actually having this consciousness shift in the future. And then there's a whole another version of us like further out, right? And so I actually shifted how I felt about the memory and that trauma that I had as a child. And I was like, we've always been millionaires. We've always been prosperous and abundant. Even if we didn't see it like externally, we knew and felt that internally, right? Okay, so that is how I shifted observing the trauma and released it and how I interact with it, right? The law of revision. And so now, anytime that I have self-limiting beliefs about finances or prosperity and abundance, because that stuff just comes up, I go back and I talk to my inner children. I'm like, hold on, remember, we've always been prosperous and abundant. Look at us now. Like, look what we have done. And we know that's going to happen in the future too, because we already have evidence of it. Okay. But I was not in a place originally to have that consciousness thought. Like, I had to go back in and heal my inner children with their money wounds and lack mentality, and then shift consciousness. Right? And so sometimes when you're listening to the law of revision, it's like, oh, you can just go in and shift. Oh, it's like, oh, you can just go in and shift your memories and just act like it didn't happen and just move forward. I'm like, sometimes those energy cords, 1111, sometimes those energy cords are running so deep within you, and you have like such an attachment to that past narrative that you need to start with healing your inner children or your past versions first, because of that energetic timestamp that they are caught in. There are things though that I will say that you can shift consciousness with immediately, where you just say, nope, this is my new reality and I am pointed forwards. All I am focused on is who I am right now and where I am headed. There are many things that I have done that with, where I'm like, it literally doesn't matter what happened in my past. All I'm focused on is forward movement. But then there's other things that have ran so deep within me with programming and trauma that I really needed to start with my inner children and my past versions and help loosen the grip of that and help them heal energetically so that we could release that PTSD up out of our body and feel lighter, and our channels more clear, and our mental space more clear, let go of those emotions we haven't processed for years so that I could clear the path for them to then have the consciousness shift. Right. And so I wanted to offer this perspective because I was listening to a lot of different videos and there was like a lot of mixed ideas on it. So I was like, oh, maybe we could talk about this a little bit deeper so people have a better understanding. So I would love to hear in the comments if this resonated with you, or if you have any questions about the things that I was talking about. And I hope you have a very magical day. I love you so much, and I'm sending you all the sparkly fairy love today.